In the vibrant city of Emwindo, a little girl named Laura was born under heartbreaking circumstances. Her mother tragically passed away in a car accident shortly after giving birth. Her father, Peter, was devastated by the loss. Overcome with grief, he vowed never to marry again and decided to raise his daughter on his own. He couldn't bear the thought of being apart from her, so he dedicated himself entirely to giving her all the love he had left. To help care for Laura, Peter's elderly mother moved in with them. She became Laura's world, showering her with love and care. Peter found some solace in his mother's presence, especially when he saw how happy Laura was. The two were inseparable. Laura couldn't imagine doing anything without her grandmother by her side. One fateful evening, Peter had to leave for a business trip, assuring Laura that he would return later that night. As darkness settled in, Laura and her grandmother remained at home. Her grandmother sat in the living room watching television while Laura played nearby. Suddenly, the power went out, plunging the house into darkness. Concerned, her grandmother called out, "Laura, stay where you are. Let me check on the generator." As she carefully made her way toward the balcony where the generator was kept, she misstepped and fell hard onto the floor. Laura, just 3 years old, heard the crash and ran toward the sound, her voice trembling. "Grandma! Grandma!" She found her grandmother lying on the floor in the darkness. The elderly woman, trying to sound strong despite the pain, said, "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just stay calm. My legs hurt a little, but I'll be fine." Tears welled up in Laura's eyes as she watched her grandmother struggle to sit up. Moments later, the electricity was restored, casting a dim glow over the room. With great effort, her grandmother managed to get back inside and settled onto the couch. That night, she was too weak to prepare dinner, and both of them went to bed hungry, the house eerily quiet. The next day, Peter returned home, full of apologies for not making it back as promised. When he learned of his mother's fall, he was deeply concerned. They took her to the doctor, and she was placed on medication, hoping for a quick recovery. However, a week later, the worst happened. Laura's grandmother passed away in her sleep. The loss shattered Laura's world. She was inconsolable, her tiny heart aching for the one person who had always been there for her. Peter grieved deeply, blaming himself for not being home when she needed him. A year after his mother's passing, when Laura was just 4 years old, Peter remarried. His new wife, Rose, was a beautiful and seemingly kind woman. Peter was relieved to have found someone who genuinely cared for Laura, or so he thought. At first, Rose was warm and affectionate, and Peter was grateful for her presence. But as soon as Rose gave birth to their daughter, Nita, her behavior toward Laura changed. Laura was excited to have a younger sister and wanted nothing more than to play with her. But whenever she tried to approach, Rose would snap at her, her voice laced with irritation. "Don't touch my baby. I don't want your bad luck rubbing off on her. You're the reason your mother died." Laura recoiled, stunned by the harsh words. The warmth she once felt from Rose had vanished, replaced by a coldness that only grew stronger with time. The once happy home began to feel cold and unwelcoming. Peter noticed the change and grew increasingly troubled. He tried to talk to Rose, pleading with her to treat both girls with kindness. "Laura and Nita are both my daughters," he said. "I don't want to see them treated differently. Laura is your daughter too." But each time he brought it up, Rose's reaction was always the same: anger and dismissal. My daughter? Never. That girl is nothing but bad luck in this house. Peter, hurt and frustrated, insisted, She's my lovely daughter, and you know it. Rose, glaring at him, warned, If you want peace in this house, don't ever bring up Laura's issue with me again. Meanwhile, Laura sat in a corner, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. Nita walked over to her, her face twisted with mischief. Without a word, she suddenly slapped Laura across the face, a cruel smirk forming as she mocked, crying baby, what are you doing? She repeated the taunt, her laughter ringing in the air. Peter, seeing this, rushed over and shouted, Nita! She's your elder sister. Don't ever do that to her again. Nita, startled, began to cry, and Rose quickly intervened, pulling her daughter close and glaring at Peter. Don't you dare shout at my baby again. Let me live my life in peace, and don't push me, or you'll regret it. Laura was left to do all the housework, mopping the floors, washing clothes, and countless other chores. But even when she completed them, Rose would assign her impossible tasks, like ordering her to fill a basket with water, knowing it couldn't be done. Nita would sit beside her mother, laughing at Laura's struggles. Peter was painfully aware of the cruelty his daughter faced, but felt powerless to stop it. He began coming home late, trying to avoid the sadness in Laura's eyes, and often returned drunk, drowning in the pain of watching his family fall apart. As the years passed, Laura and Nita grew into stunning young women, but their lives took very different paths. Laura had come to accept her fate as little more than a servant in her own home. Every morning, before anyone else stirred, she would slip out of bed to begin her endless cycle of cooking, cleaning, and scrubbing the floors. Her days were filled with relentless labor, her hands rough and calloused from years of work. Yet, she carried on without complaint. Despite the burden she bore, Laura found comfort in the small moments she shared with her father. Whenever Peter had to leave early and Rose was still asleep, he would find Laura already deep in her tasks. He would gently pull her aside, his voice soft, but filled with conviction. Laura, he would say, I see everything you go through, and it breaks my heart. But listen to me. One day, this cruelty you endure will become the stepping stone to a better life. You are not cursed. You are stronger than you know. Laura would nod, her heart swelling with emotion, and she'd hug her father tightly. Goodbye, Dad. I love you, she'd whisper, holding on to the warmth of his words. These brief moments with her father were the only bright spots in Laura's life. They gave her hope, a small but steady flame that kept her going. She cherished his words, believing that one day she would rise above the hardship and find the freedom she longed for. One afternoon, as Laura was cleaning up in the kitchen, she heard a knock on the gate. Quickly, she left her work and hurried to see who it was. To her surprise, 4 elderly men stood at the entrance. Good afternoon, sir. Laura greeted them politely. Who are you looking for? My mother and father aren't home. One of the elders stepped forward and asked, Are you Laura? Yes, I am, she answered, her face filled with surprise. We are here to talk to you. Your father sent us. Curious and a little worried, Laura allowed them in. As soon as they sat down, Rose walked in. "Ah, madam, welcome," one of the elders greeted her. Laura quickly explained, "They just arrived. They haven't said anything yet." But Rose cut in sharply. "So, what are you doing in my house? What are you doing with her? Someone should tell me what it is, or whatever you need to say, and leave my house." One of the elders responded calmly, "We've come from Namboko village. Earlier today, we were having an elders meeting at our village square when we noticed a car that had run into a ditch. Our young men rushed to the scene and managed to pull out a man who was barely alive. With his last breath, he told us, 'Don't bother taking me to the hospital. I have nothing left to live for.' He then described this house and asked us to tell his daughter, Laura, not to give up on life as he did." Laura's heart shattered as she screamed, "No, no, my father can't die. He can't leave me all alone here." Rose, showing little emotion, asked the elders, "Did he say anything else?" The elders shook their heads in unison. "No," they replied. "He passed away immediately after those words." Rose frowned and dismissed them coldly. "You can go now. Please leave my house." As the elders left, Laura collapsed to the floor, crying bitterly. She knew that her father's death marked the beginning of a new and darker chapter in her life, one filled with uncertainty and fear. As soon as the elders left, Rose stormed back into the house, a twisted smile on her face. She turned to Laura and sneered, "Prepare to die with your father and mother, or get ready to cope with the worst of me." Without another word, Rose charged into Laura's room. She grabbed all of Laura's good clothes and shoes, carried them to the backyard, and set them on fire. As the flames rose, she taunted, "This is my house, and no one competes with my child." From that day on, Rose's hostility toward Laura intensified. Each day brought new cruelty, and Laura's life became even more unbearable. At the palace, King Obadele had ruled over Mwindo City for more than 25 years, guiding his people with wisdom and strength. His only son, Prince Kamari, had been sent abroad at the age of 10 to receive his secondary and tertiary education. Now, according to the customs of the land, it was time for Prince Kamari to return home. Tradition demanded that Prince Kamari had to marry a woman from Mwindo City. To ensure the right match, King Obadele issued a royal decree. The High Chief was to gather all the eligible young women in the city for a selection process. From this group, the best 15 would be chosen to live in the palace with the prince for 3 months upon his return, affording him the opportunity to choose his bride. The king gave the High Chief strict instructions to carry out the selection process with the utmost care and integrity. "The future of our land rests on this choice," King Obadele advised. "Choose wisely, for the woman who becomes the prince's bride will shape the destiny of Mwindo." Before the interview day, Rose had already bribed the High Chief's wife to ensure her daughter, Nita, would be selected. On the morning of the interview, Nita was preparing herself, her excitement barely contained as she dressed. She suddenly shouted at Laura, "Don't just stand there staring. Polish my shoes." Laura hurried over to grab the shoes when Rose entered the room. "What is she doing here?" Rose snapped. "Don't let her touch you or anything you're taking to that place. I won't have her bad luck rubbing off on you." Nita, now ready, walked with pride toward the door, her head held high. As she walked, Rose cheered, "Hail the future queen of Imwindo City." She proudly escorted her daughter to the door, while Laura watched from a distance, tears silently rolling down her cheeks. Just as Rose was about to close the gate, Nita turned and said, "Mom, as the future queen of Imwindo City, I shouldn't have to carry my own bag. I need a servant, someone to carry it for me." Rose laughed, pride swelling in her chest. "You truly are my daughter. May your kingdom reign forever." She then turned to Laura and commanded, "Get your slippers and go with her. Make sure you clean her shoes before she enters the hall." Laura hesitated. "Ma'am, I haven't bathed, brushed my teeth, and my clothes are dirty. Can I at least do my personal hygiene and change?" Rose's face twisted with anger. "Get your slippers and get out of here now." Feeling humiliated, Laura slipped on her worn-out slippers, quickly collected her sister's handbag, and both of them went to the gate. Laura walked beside her younger sister to the town hall, her heart heavy with shame, while Nita walked majestically, smiling all the way. All the chiefs and interviewers arrived at the town hall 2 hours before the scheduled time, standing outside as they waited for the cleaners to finish up inside. As the ladies of Imwindo City began arriving, one by one, the interviewers handed them tags, while one of them recorded their names in a file. By 15 minutes before the scheduled time, all the ladies had gathered at the town hall, ready for the interview and selection process. However, since the hall was still being cleaned, they waited outside. Laura noticed Nita looking tired, so she found chairs for her and her 2 friends to sit on. Then, she approached an elderly woman who was busy sweeping the compound right in front of the ladies. "May I help you with that?" Laura asked. "Please, let me take the broom and finish sweeping." The old woman shook her head. "No, my daughter, you're here for an important event. You shouldn't be doing this kind of work." Laura insisted. "I can't stand by while you do this. Please, let me help." The cleaner hesitated. "I can't accept, my daughter. You might punish me if you become queen." Laura replied earnestly, "Being a queen doesn't make someone superior. Any position in life is about serving others. Please, let me do this." Moved by Laura's humility, the cleaner finally agreed and handed her the broom. As Laura swept the compound, whispers and laughter erupted among the other ladies. One of Nita's friends sneered, "I'm so embarrassed to be related to Laura." Nita, clearly relishing the moment, added, "I'm ashamed to share the same father with her." Despite the cruel comments and mocking, Laura focused on her task, her dignity intact as she quietly swept the compound and dusted the chairs. As soon as the sweeping was finished, the High Chief stepped forward to address the gathered ladies. "Greetings to all of you," he began. "I'm pleased to announce that we have come to the end of today's interview. My team and I arrived early to observe every one of you as you were arriving at this venue. I want all of you to know that everything that happened here today was not a coincidence. They were part of this event, and after careful consideration, we have selected the 10 beautiful ladies who will be coming to the palace for close observation. This will allow Prince Kamari to choose his bride from among you." He began calling out the names of the chosen ladies, announcing 9 of them before pausing, realizing that one was missing. Looking around, he asked one of the interviewers to find Laura. The interviewer soon discovered her behind the hall, sweeping. The interviewer asked in surprise, "Were you one of the paid cleaners? Why weren't you inside?" Laura smiled humbly. "I'm not even qualified to be a palace servant, let alone the future queen. I'm not here for the contest. I only came to look after my kid sister, who's here for the competition." The man chuckled and said, "Well, the High Chief wants to see you inside." When Laura walked inside, the High Chief looked at her and said, "Join the other 9. He then addressed the group. "You must all move into the palace next week Wednesday, which is exactly a week from today. Everyone must arrive by 3 p.m., or you and your parents or guardians will face serious consequences." He handed each of the chosen ladies a letter. "Give this to your parents or guardians. I'll see you at the palace next week." Laura's face was a picture of surprise as she accepted the letter. She knew this would bring nothing but trouble at home, as her unexpected selection would undoubtedly stir up tension and resentment. As Laura and Nita arrived home, Rose greeted them with a triumphant smile. "I knew they would pick you, Nita. I've already paid for the service." But to her surprise, Nita sat down and began to sob uncontrollably. "What happened, my daughter? Were you not chosen?" Rose asked, her voice filled with concern. But Nita just kept sobbing, unable to speak. Rose turned sharply to Laura. "What did you do to my daughter?" Laura quietly handed over the letter she had received. "I was instructed to move to the palace next week, Wednesday." Nita's tears turned into anger as she shouted, "You're not going anywhere. I can't stand the thought of you being in that palace." Rose's eyes widened as she asked, "You were invited to the palace too?" Nita, still seething, responded, "Yes, she was asked to come to the palace. I was the second name they called, while she was the last person." Rose took both letters and read them carefully. "Prince Kamari has been in Paris for over 15 years, she muttered, her mind racing. "I'm certain he wouldn't choose someone as lowly as you." She then turned to Laura with a cold glare. "For the next week, you're forbidden from brushing your teeth or bathing. I'll make sure you're sent back from the gate before you even set foot inside that palace." Nita, who had been crying moments before, burst into laughter. "I knew I could count on you, Mom. I don't want her anywhere near me in that place." Aisha glanced at the letters again, her expression hardening. "If it were not for this letter, I would have sent you to my mother's village to spend the rest of your life there." That week was pure hell for Lillian. Aisha made sure she didn't do any personal hygiene and forbade her from washing her clothes. Instead, she kept Lillian busy with endless house chores, determined to wear her out and make her look as disheveled as possible. Meanwhile, Aisha was busy preparing Rhea to perfection, teaching her how to smile elegantly and how to move her waist gracefully while walking. She even hired a skin specialist to pamper Rhea's skin and hair, and bought her a brand new set of makeup. On the day they were to go to the palace, Aisha woke Lillian at 3 a.m., demanding that she cook, clean, and do every other chore in the house. She piled up nearly all the clothes in the house for Lillian to wash. And when that was done, she ordered her to fill a basket with water to the brim. Lillian sobbed quietly as she worked, exhausted and overwhelmed. As she toiled away, Rhea taunted her. "Lillian, my mom has trained you well to be my slave. When I'm made the crown queen, you'll definitely live in the palace with me, as one of my servants, I promise." At 2:30 p.m., Rhea left for the palace, looking every bit the royal candidate. Meanwhile, Lillian was still struggling to fill the basket with water. Aisha sneered at her. "No one will let someone like you into the palace. You look absolutely disgusting." At 3:45 p.m., Aisha barked at Lillian. "Get out of my sight and head to the palace. You have 15 minutes left, and you better get there on time. If you cause me any trouble, you'll regret it." Lillian hurried out of the house, looking dirty and disheveled. When she arrived at the palace, the gateman took one look at her and stopped her in disbelief. "Are you one of the ladies here for the prince?" he asked, eyes wide with surprise. Lillian nodded hesitantly. "Yes." The gateman shook his head in shock. "Why are you dressed like this? You don't look good at all." Seeing her pitiful state, he quickly called over one of the palace servants. "Please," he urged, "get her a change of clothes. She needs to look at least a little better, and take her to the last room that was prepared for the guests." The palace servant nodded and hurried off to help Lillian, while the gateman watched with a mix of concern and pity, hoping she wouldn't face any trouble once inside. At 7 p.m., all the ladies were gathered in one of the sitting rooms, anxiously awaiting the arrival of Prince Martins. The room was filled with a tense silence until Loveth broke it. "Hi, everyone," she said, her voice confident. "I want to make it clear that I'll be the one sitting beside the prince when he comes in. I can't stand the thought of anyone else taking that spot beside my future husband." Approaching her, he said firmly, "Laura, you need to stop this. You're here as a guest, not a servant. Please stick to the activities in the program booklet." Laura was taken aback. "Please, sir," she pleaded. "I must do this every day. I'm just helping them. They're my friends. Please don't stop me." Taylor sighed, sensing her sincerity. "You're putting my job at risk. If the king finds out, I could be in serious trouble." Laura's eyes filled with concern, but she pleaded once more. "Please help me. Don't stop me." Taylor hesitated for a moment before finally nodding. "Okay, I'll discuss it with the prince." Laura's face lit up with gratitude. "Thank you so much, sir," she said, her voice filled with appreciation. As Laura and Taylor were talking, they suddenly heard loud noises coming from the other ladies. The arguments had escalated into a full-blown fight between Annie, Nita, and Kate, each of them vying for dominance in the competition. By the time the guards arrived, the scene was chaotic. Taylor shook his head in disbelief as he sat down and said, "This is so childish. Why don't you wait for the prince to make his choice in front of everyone? There's no need to fight over this. Just do your best and let the outcome speak for itself." Laura quietly watched the commotion, her eyes resting on Nita. Nita, sensing Laura's gaze, sneered and said loudly, "Laura, I would have invited you to my room to wash my things as usual, but I don't need you here anymore. The servant assigned to me has taken over your She said this in front of everyone, trying to humiliate Laura, but Laura remained calm, nodding slightly. "All thanks to her," she replied, "but I'm still at your service anytime you need me." That night, as Laura settled into bed, she whispered to herself, "I refuse to give up on life. I am not a mistake. I will surely succeed." These words, spoken in the quiet of the night, were a promise she made to herself, a vow to rise above the challenges she faced. Instead of just whispering to herself, she hummed a quiet melody, a tune of hope that helped ease her heart and strengthen her resolve. 2 days later, as promised, Rose returned to the palace with a plan. She handed Nita a small vial containing a seducing charm. "Arrange a private meeting with the prince," Rose instructed. "When you see him approaching, quickly apply this to your lips and lick them 3 times. He'll lose his heart to you instantly. Don't make any mistakes. Fight for what belongs to you." Nita nodded, grateful for her mother's help. Once back inside, Nita sought out Ben and pleaded with him to arrange a one-on-one meeting with the prince. She slipped him some money and promised more when her mother returned. Ben reluctantly agreed. As the prince approached, Nita followed her mother's instructions, licking her lips 3 times while saying, "Aren't I beautiful?" The prince smiled warmly and replied, "You are very beautiful, my dear." From that moment on, their relationship blossomed. The prince became so fond of Nita that he would go to great lengths to protect her. When the other ladies, Annie, Agatha, Kate, Ada, and Precious, noticed the growing bond between Nita and the prince, they made a vow that they would not leave the palace without securing a marriage. Determined to find a place in the royal family no matter what it took, they strategized among themselves. Meanwhile, Laura immersed herself in learning from the palace's female servants and soon began assisting the cook in the kitchen. Her food quickly became popular among the staff, and the cook, impressed by Laura's skills, asked her to share her secrets. One evening, as the king enjoyed his dinner, he noticed a remarkable change in the food's flavor. He requested the cook, Madame Linda, to come to him. "I've noticed a dramatic improvement in your cooking over the past 3 days," the king said. "The food is delicious, and I want to increase your salary for this. You've really outdone yourself." Madame Linda smiled and replied, "Long live the king. It's not just my work. One of the ladies here has been helping in the kitchen, and she was the one that prepared dinner for the past 3 days. She asked to assist, and with permission from the prince through Mr. Taylor, her request was granted." The king was intrigued. "I'd like to meet her tomorrow." The next day, in his private sitting room, the king requested to see the young lady who had contributed to the improved meals. Laura entered, dressed simply, and greeted the king. The king smiled warmly and asked, "What can I do to thank you for the wonderful meals you've prepared?" Laura bowed her head respectfully and responded, "Long live the king. All I ask is to be employed as one of the palace servants. I would be honored to serve you and your kingdom." The king nodded thoughtfully. "I will consider your request once the competition is over." Laura thanked him and left the room, her heart full of hope and excitement. The day before the final selection was a memorable one. All the ladies, the prince, and his 2 guards gathered on the field for a day of exercise, dressed in their sportswear. Before starting, the prince addressed the group. "I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves throughout this competition. I want to thank you for your time, sacrifices, and the effort you've put in. I've cherished every moment spent with you. Tomorrow is the big day when I'll announce my queen publicly. Additionally, the king has promised a token of 300,000 naira to each of you. Once again, thank you for everything." With that, the prince signaled the start of the sports activities. The group engaged in jogging, running, walking, and other exercises, embracing the day with enthusiasm and joy. As soon as they entered the palace, Laura approached Taylor with a serious expression. "Sir, I would like your assistance in securing a position as a palace servant. I'm eager to continue working and contributing here, rather than returning home and remaining idle." Taylor looked thoughtful and replied, "You mentioned that the king would consider your request. Let's wait for his decision. But I also wonder, are you not thinking about marriage? Isn't that something you should be considering by now?" Laura shook her head gently. "Marriage is important, but I'm not ready for it at the moment. My focus right now is serving people with joy." Taylor raised an eyebrow, a hint of curiosity in his voice. "I'm sure no one here matches your taste. Are you just waiting for a wealthy man to come along?" Laura smiled warmly. "I'm open to marrying someone who values and accepts me for who I am. Wealth is not my priority. I believe that with mutual respect and hard work, we can build a successful life together. What matters most is finding someone who will support and cherish me, regardless of their financial status." Taylor nodded, clearly impressed. "That's a commendable outlook. Keep your hopes high and stay aware of your surroundings. Your attitude and dedication have been remarkable throughout this competition." Laura thanked him sincerely, her eyes reflecting gratitude. "Thank you for all your support and guidance during this time. It has meant a lot to me." The big day. The palace event hall was transformed into a breathtaking arena for the grand event. The hall was adorned with precious gemstones and beautiful statues, creating an atmosphere of opulence and grandeur. The arrival of guests from the neighboring villages and the city was well coordinated. As the guests arrived, they walked majestically in their finest attire, their excitement palpable as they took their seats. Villagers, dressed in their best, eagerly awaited the announcement of Mwindo City's future queen. As the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, dancers and singers took the stage, their performances adding a festive rhythm to the day. Amidst the lively entertainment, the 10 finalists made their grand entrance. The ladies, dressed elegantly, proceeded to their seats at the high table, each hoping to catch the prince's eye. King Obadele rose to address the gathering, his voice resonant with authority and warmth. "Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, and beloved citizens of Mwindo City, I extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you. Today's event holds immense significance for the future of our land. As many of you know, this tradition is both a time-honored custom and a vital part of our heritage. I invited my son, Prince Kamari, back from abroad to undertake a responsibility that is crucial for our kingdom. He has come home to select his bride according to our ancient customs. I understand that most of you may not yet be familiar with Prince Kamari, which is why we brought the candidates to the palace. This has allowed both the prince and the ladies to spend time together, understand each other, and for him to make an informed decision about who will be the best fit for our future queen. King Obadel continued, "Without further delay, I'd like to invite Detective Ben, one of the managers of our competition, to present the detailed report." The audience erupted in applause as Detective Ben stepped up to the podium, his demeanor serious and poised. "Good day, esteemed guests," Ben began. "Today's report is crucial for maintaining the integrity of this competition and ensuring transparency. We are addressing these issues publicly to prevent any misunderstandings or rumors that could tarnish the reputations of our king, prince, and the kingdom. To begin with, prior to the arrival of the ladies, we installed CCTV cameras throughout the palace, both inside and outside, to ensure the safety of our ladies and that of Prince Kamari. Over the past 3 months, we hosted 10 ladies here. Unfortunately, we discovered that 5 of them, Kate, Annie, Agatha, and Precious, were pregnant by newly hired guards. However, not all were marred by such incidents. The remaining ladies maintained exemplary conduct throughout the competition. Although they were not chosen by Prince Kamari, their outstanding behavior did not go unnoticed. In recognition of their integrity, Prince Kamari has decided to award them an additional 100,000 naira each, on top of the 300,000 naira already promised to all participants. The crowd clapped enthusiastically for the honorable contestants. Rose, who had been smiling in anticipation, now wore a puzzled expression. She was surprised not to see Laura's name mentioned among the top contenders and muttered to herself, "She must have committed a grievous offense. I will definitely deny knowing her today." Detective Ben continued, "Now, I'd like to call Prince Kamari, who sat next to King Obadeli, to join us at the podium. And Mr. Taylor, please come up as well." The crowd buzzed with excitement as Prince Kamari and Taylor walked to the front. Taylor took the microphone with a mischievous grin. "Ladies and gentlemen," Taylor began, "I have a story to share. Immediately after I returned to the country from abroad, I decided to check on my old primary school friend in one of our neighboring villages. I was shocked when he told me that he now works as a truck pusher in the market to keep body and soul together. He explained how things got bad for him when he lost both parents after our primary education." Taylor paused. "But before we dive into the big reveal, let me ask Nita to come forward." Nita glided to the front, her every step oozing confidence as she twisted her waist. Her mother, Rose, clapped enthusiastically, beaming with pride. Taylor continued, "Here we have Nita, one of our stunning contestants. She's worked hard to win the prince's heart, even going as far as having her mother bring a charm to ensure her victory. What she didn't know was that we swapped that charm with simple Vaseline. And the prince she's been charming isn't actually Prince Kamari. He is an old friend of mine who was brought in to disguise himself as the prince." The disguised prince, smiling brightly, said, "Surprise! I'm just an ordinary guy from Namboko village, a poor wheelbarrow pusher, happily married with 6 kids." The audience burst into laughter and gasps. While Rose was surprised at the twist, Nita's face turned a vivid shade of red. The shock of the revelation was evident as she struggled to comprehend the unexpected turn of events. The mix of disbelief and humor made her shake uncomfortably. Taylor grinned widely and said, "Hold on, everyone. My real name isn't Taylor. I am actually Prince Kamari of Umwendo City." The crowd gasped in surprise and excitement. The prince continued, "I have been in the country 3 months earlier than the time announced to enable me to prepare my friend for this task. I was one of the interviewers at the town hall. I was the gate man the day the ladies arrived at the palace. So, I'm overjoyed to announce that the lady who has truly won my heart is Laura. Laura, please come up here and join me at the podium. Let me introduce you to my people." Laura, stunned and ecstatic, made her way to the front. As she approached, the female servants, brimming with excitement, rushed to her with cheers and laughter. They lifted her up and carried her around the field, chanting, "She's our queen! She's our queen! Hail the future queen of Mwindo!" The crowd erupted in applause and cheers, celebrating the new queen of Mwindo City. Music played, and the entire hall was filled with joy and excitement. Rose, who had been watching the drama unfold with mounting disbelief, suddenly shouted, "This can't be! My daughter was supposed to be the future queen." Overwhelmed by shock, her legs gave way, and she collapsed to the ground. Nita, still standing, looked utterly bewildered, tears streaming down her face as she struggled to comprehend what was happening. King Obadele stepped forward, a broad smile spreading across his face. "If you need more clarity about today's events," he said with a chuckle, "you're welcome to visit the secretary's office to view the CCTV footage. It will clear up any confusion." Smiling broadly, he added, "My son's wedding is set to take place in 2 months. Mark the date. I extend an invitation to all of you to join us in celebrating this joyous occasion." The crowd erupted in cheers and applause, thrilled by the announcements and the unexpected twist of events. While the second group of female palace servants danced around Laura, chanting, "Hail the future queen of Mwindo City." 1 month later, Nita discovered that she was pregnant for the truck pusher, who had disguised himself as the prince during the competition. Devastated by the revelation, Nita and her mother, Rose, decided to leave Mwindo City, secretly in disgrace. They traveled to Rose's mother's village, seeking refuge away from the judgmental eyes of their community. In the quiet of the village, Nita gave birth to a stillborn baby. It was later discovered that she could no longer bear children. Hello, besties. What lessons did you learn from this story? Please share them with us in the comment section below. I also want to remind you that giving up on yourself is never an option. You are not a mistake, and whatever situation you're going through can become a stepping stone to a brighter future. Please subscribe to this channel. Thank you for watching. God bless you. I love you all.